Do you know what the world fears most? Not armies, not weapons, but the truth that history sometimes forgets its bravest sons. Have you ever wondered how many acts of courage were never written down? How many moments of bravery vanished, not because they lacked greatness, but because history simply looked away, distracted by louder stories and larger nations? Tonight we reopen one of those moments. A night when snow drifted down like silent ash from a broken sky. A night so cold the wind could cut through bone and memory alike. A night when the world expected collapse, when commanders whispered that the line was doomed, when retreat seemed inevitable, and when survival felt more like hope than possibility. Yet in that darkness stood a small group of Filipino soldiers. No backup, no guarantees, no promise that dawn would ever come. Just resolve, just brotherhood, just the unshakable belief that retreat was not an option, not while others depended on them. Most people have never heard their names. Most history books didn't bother to write them. But if they had not stood their ground that night, an entire American regiment, fathers, brothers, sons, would have vanished into the snow and silence of Korea. And the world would never have known how close it came to losing them all. Before the battle, before the chaos, before fate demanded everything from him, there was simply a young man named Benedicto Benny Cruz. Not a general, not a legend, just a sergeant from a small coastal town in Batangas, where mornings smelled of sea salt and fried bangus, and where boys grew up learning that strength isn't loud. It's steady. Benny never imagined his name would one day brush against history. To him, war wasn't glory or medals. It was duty, a responsibility carried quietly the way Filipinos often do, without boasting, without expectation, without needing to be seen. He had joined the military long before Korea erupted in flames, not because he wanted to fight, but because he wanted to protect. His father used to say, "A real man doesn't look for trouble, but he never walks away when someone needs help." Those words shaped him, carved him, guided him across an ocean onto a battlefield he never expected to face. Life in Korea was a shock to every Filipino soldier. Back home, sunlight warmed their skin. In Korea, the cold bit like teeth. Back home, they heard tricycles, radios, laughter. Here, the only sound at night was the hollow whistle of wind rattling frozen tents and the distant, haunting echo of war. Benny often wrote letters home with numb fingers, telling his wife Lucia, "Don't worry, I am safe." But the truth was more complicated. No one was safe. Not here, not now. One evening, near a dim lantern flame, Benny sat polishing his rifle when he noticed a small movement nearby. It was a young Korean girl, barefoot, shivering, holding a small bundle, wrapped in cloth. She walked up to him slowly, hesitant but determined. With trembling hands, she unfolded the cloth. Inside was a tiny wooden carving, a small figure kneeling in prayer. She held it out to him. No words, just a silent offering. Benny froze, unsure whether to accept it. The girl finally whispered in broken English, "Filipino soldiers, protect us." Then she bowed, deeply, respectfully, before turning and disappearing into the snowy dark. Benny stared at the carving for a long time, and something shifted inside him. Not fear, not pride, something deeper, purpose. Later that night, American troops sat around a fading campfire nearby, their voices low, nervous. One young American private spoke just loud enough for the wind to carry. "I heard the Chinese are moving in mass. Hundreds, maybe thousands." Silence followed. Some tried to laugh it off. Others stared at the flames, pretending they didn't hear. But Benny heard every word, and for the first time he felt it, a shadow creeping through the valley, a storm forming beyond the mountains. Not of weather, of war. Before turning in for the night, Benny placed the wooden figure inside his jacket, close to his heart. Some soldiers take luck, some take faith, some take memory. Benny took all three. And as he lay down, eyes open, breathing slow, he asked himself a question he would soon answer with his life. If the storm truly comes, will I be enough? But stories like theirs don't disappear. Even if no pages remember them, even if no medals bear their names, time has a way of keeping certain memories breathing. Sometimes the earth itself remembers. And on that quiet Korean night, before the gunfire, before the chaos, before fate revealed its teeth, the snow seemed to pause, as if listening. It was the kind of night where every sound felt louder than it should. The faint rattle of metal canteens, the crunch of boots on frost, the soft hum of tired soldiers trying to keep fear small. In the distance, the mountains stood like silent witnesses, dark, heavy, unmoving. Benny stood on watch, breath fogging in the cold air, hands tucked into his sleeves for warmth. To some, he looked calm. But inside, thoughts ran like rivers, steady, fast, unstoppable. He remembered the little girl's carved figure resting against his chest. He remembered his wife's handwriting, his father's voice. He remembered home, and then a sound, soft, faint, a rhythm not made by wind or animals, boots, many boots, marching, not hurried, coordinated, controlled, a human tide. Benny's pulse quickened. He lifted his hand slowly, signaling silence to the soldiers near him. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then it came. A deep, low horn, long and hollow, rolling through the valley like a warning from another age. Filipino soldiers stiffened. Some swallowed hard. Some whispered silent prayers. Some tightened their grip on rifles. Nearby, an American soldier turned pale and whispered, "It's starting." Benny didn't speak. He didn't need to. Instead, he reached inside his jacket and touched the carved wooden figure, pressing it gently, firmly, as if drawing strength from something beyond himself. Then he whispered, not to his men, not to the wind, but to whatever force still watched over that valley. "If this is the night, let us stand." Moments later, the first shadowed figures appeared along the ridgeline, hundreds of them, then hundreds more behind them. The enemy didn't rush immediately. They observed, measured, studied the line they believed would soon break. And then, like a storm finally choosing where to strike, the valley erupted. Gunfire tore through the silence. Echoes bounced off mountainsides. The snow, once white and gentle, now sparked with fire and fury. Shouts in multiple languages filled the dark. The line shook, but it did not move. Together, shoulder to shoulder, Filipino soldiers met the first wave head-on. Benny fired, reloaded, fired again, each breath burning his lungs. Yet through the chaos, through the roar and smoke and panic, something unexpected rose among them. Not fear, not despair, not hesitation, but unity. A single quiet truth shared between every Filipino on that line. If we fall protecting others. And in that moment, the night that was supposed to break them began instead to remember them. War does not always arrive like a thunderclap. Sometimes it unfolds, wave after wave, each one heavier than the last. The first assault tested the line. The second threatened to crack it. But the third? That was the moment the battlefield changed from a fight to a reckoning. The Chinese forces surged forward with overwhelming numbers. Their shouts echoed through the valley. Their footsteps shook the earth, their determination matched only by their ruthlessness. Tracer rounds streaked across the sky like falling stars. Grenades burst with flashes of orange fire, painting the snow in violent color. Filipino and American positions trembled under the impact. For a moment, just a moment, the world seemed to tilt. One American unit began to fall back, forced into retreat by sheer force of numbers. If the collapse spread, the entire defense would unravel. Someone shouted over the commotion, "The flank is breaking! We can't hold it!" Fear flickered through the ranks. Retreat was an option. Survival depended on it. Logic demanded it. But Benny? He didn't move. His boots stayed planted in the snow as if nailed into the earth. Because retreat wasn't part of the oath he carried. Not tonight. Not here. Not while others depended on them. He scanned the chaos, searching for weakness, searching for the point where everything could fall apart. And then he saw it. A gap. Small at first, barely noticeable, but growing, widening, threatening to split the entire defense in two. If the enemy pushed through that gap, the Filipinos would be surrounded, the Americans behind them would be lost, and the line, the entire line, would collapse. Benny felt something shift inside him. Not panic, not fear, decision. Without waiting for orders, without hesitating, he shouted, "With me!" His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. 7 men turned, then 10, then more. No one asked questions, no one hesitated. Filipino soldiers moved as one, charging toward the breach with a resolve that defied logic. Bullets ripped through the air around them. Snow exploded at their feet. The enemy surged forward to meet them. But they kept running, not because they believed they would survive, but because they believed someone else had to. When they reached the gap, the fighting shifted from rifles to something raw, closer, more desperate. Bayonets flashed, shouts mixed with breath and blood. Hands gripped weapons hard enough to shake. Benny fought with everything he had, not thinking, not analyzing, just moving, blocking, striking, protecting. At one point, a young soldier behind him faltered, fear locking his knees. Benny grabbed his shoulder, eyes burning with fierce clarity. "Stand. You are not alone." The boy steadied and fought. Minutes felt like hours. Every second felt like the difference between survival and oblivion. Then, slowly, the assault slowed. Not because the enemy lacked force, but because the Filipinos refused to break. That small group, that handful of men, did something almost impossible. They held. They blocked the breach long enough for the American unit behind them to regroup and avoid being overrun. And in that moment, as gunfire echoed across the valley, something undeniable happened. The battle shifted. The line, which moments earlier trembled on the edge of collapse, began to steady. Not because they had more weapons, not because they had more men, but because courage, real courage, had chosen to stand firm. As the wave finally pulled back, Benny lowered his weapon, chest heaving, hands shaking from exhaustion and cold. All around him were tired faces, bruised, burned, blooded, but still standing. One soldier looked at him with wide eyes and whispered, "We shouldn't be alive." Benny wiped frost and sweat from his brow. His voice was tired, but steady. "Then let's make sure we deserve it. Some battles are won with strategy, some are won with numbers, but a few, a rare few, are won with something the world cannot measure. And on that frozen Korean night, the enemy returned, with the intention to end everything, not to push, not to pressure, but to crush completely. The warning came not through radios or scouts, but through the ground, a deep vibration beneath the snow, as if the earth itself sensed what was coming and trembled. The men felt it before they heard it. Then, the horn sounded again. Not one, but many. Layered, echoing, ancient, their tones rolling like thunder trapped beneath stone. Private Santos whispered, "Diosco, this is the full force." Benny didn't respond. His breath formed slow, controlled clouds in the freezing air. He knew this wave would be different. The enemy wasn't coming to test their strength. They were coming to erase it. The first silhouettes appeared through the dark. Dozens, then hundreds, then more, stretching across the ridge like a tide made of shadows. They moved fast, faster than before, determined, relentless. Machine guns opened fire, mortars cracked the sky, tracer rounds laced the darkness like burning threads. The Filipino line shook under the assault, but it did not fall. Men reloaded with trembling fingers. Some fired from behind makeshift walls of snow. Others fought through jammed rifles, icy metal resisting their touch. One young soldier beside Benny took a round to his shoulder and collapsed. Benny knelt beside him. The boy was pale, teeth clenched against pain. "Sir," he gasped, "should we fall back?" Benny shook his head slowly. Not with anger, not with fear, but with conviction. "If we fall back, they don't just take ground," he whispered. "They take lives." The boy nodded, then rose again, wounded but standing. And the line held. But the enemy wasn't finished. A section of the Chinese force suddenly changed direction, swinging wide, fast, trying to flank them from the right. If they succeeded, the entire battalion would be pinned, and the Americans behind them trapped. Benny saw it unfolding, saw the danger forming like a crack in glass ready to shatter everything. He raised his voice, louder than before, fierce and urgent. "Right flank! Move! Now!" A group of Filipinos sprinted towards the threat, their boots carving deep trenches into the snow. Gunfire followed them. Explosions shook the air. Men stumbled, but none stopped. They reached the new front just as enemy forces closed in. The fighting became brutal, close, personal, no distance, no barrier, only survival. Bayonets, knives, bare hands. Every movement was desperate, but every action had purpose. Then, through the chaos, an explosion ripped the ground near Benny's position. He staggered, ears ringing, vision blurred. A hot sting exploded through his side. Shrapnel. Blood soaked his coat, warm at first, then freezing into the fabric. He dropped to one knee. The world around him flickered, sound fading in and out like a broken radio transmission. For a moment, just a second, the thought crossed his mind. Maybe this is where it ends. But then, he felt something against his chest. The wooden figure. Small. Simple. Given by a trembling child who believed strangers in foreign uniforms could be protectors. Benny tightened his grip on it and pulled himself upright, not because his body was strong, but because his purpose was. When his men saw him stand, bleeding, breath ragged, eyes still sharp, something ignited among them. A spark, a unified roar tore across the line, Filipino voices rising with fire and defiance. "Hindi atras!" We do not retreat. Those words hit the night like artillery. The enemy saw it, felt it, and for the first time, hesitated. Then, finally, salvation arrived. American artillery lit up the horizon, shells raining down behind enemy lines, forcing the Chinese wave to stagger, then scatter. The assault broke, momentum collapsed. Silence, harsh, unreal, began to replace the chaos. Breathing heavy, exhausted, shaking, the Filipino line remained standing. Torn uniforms, burning muscles, frozen fingers, but still there, still holding, still refusing to yield. One soldier looked at Benny, voice hoarse, barely audible. "Sir, we did it." Benny exhaled, a shaky breath, half relief, half disbelief. He looked across the battlefield, the men who fought beside him, the snow stained with sacrifice, the smoke rising into a sky finally beginning to calm. And with a voice quiet but unwavering, he answered, "No, we stood." Days passed, then rumors began. Chinese troops gathering in the mountains. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Some soldiers laughed it off. Others fell silent. But deep down, everyone felt it. The storm was coming. That night, Elias wrote to his mother, "If fear visits me, I will not let it stay." He folded the letter carefully, not knowing if she would ever read it. The attack did not begin with gunfire. It began with silence, a silence so heavy it felt alive. Then, a distant horn, long, hollow, ancient. The sound rolled across the valley like thunder trying to wake the dead. Private Segundo whispered, "Sir, they're coming." And then, the mountains moved. Thousands of silhouettes rushed through the snow with terrifying speed. Tracer rounds lit the darkness. American lines struggled. Some sections collapsed. Retreat orders spread through the radio like wildfire. But the Filipino troops, they did not move. They did not hesitate. They held the line. Gunfire erupted. Grenades exploded. Snow turned to mud and ash. Elias felt fear, real fear, the kind that shakes the bones and tightens the lungs. But beside him, Segundo kept firing, reloading, firing again, his voice cutting through chaos. "Stand your ground! Huwag umatras!" Wave after wave hit them, but the Filipinos refused to fall back. Not one. Suddenly, a breakthrough. Chinese soldiers flooded toward a gap in the line, aiming to encircle an American company forced into retreat. If they succeeded, hundreds would die. Without waiting for orders, Elias shouted, "With me!" A dozen Filipinos sprinted towards the breach, bullets slicing the air beside them. Segundo reached the gap first. He fired until his rifle clicked empty. Then, with frozen fingers, he fixed his bayonet. And charged. His courage spread like wildfire. The Filipinos formed a wall, shoulder to shoulder, and held that position against impossible numbers. They bought seconds, then minutes, then just enough time for the Americans to escape the trap. During a final clash, Segundo was hit. Elias reached him and dropped to his knees. Blood darkened the snow beneath him. Segundo looked up, eyes fierce, voice fading. "Tell them." Filipinos didn't run. And with a trembling breath, he closed his eyes. At that exact moment, artillery thundered behind them. American reinforcements arrived. The enemy faltered, then withdrew. The line held, because a small group of men refused to break. History never carved their names into monuments. No parade honored them. No textbook told their story. But somewhere in Korea lies a patch of frozen earth that remembers the footprints of Filipinos, who came with no demand for glory, only the quiet belief that courage, true courage, is doing what must be done, even when the world may never know.